It's official, everybody. It's a pandemic. Of course, you and I have known that for many, many weeks at this point in time, but it is now officially called a pandemic. Hello, everyone. This is Chris Martinson. It's March 11th, 2020. I'm here with your SARS-CoV-2 update, aka the honey badger virus, because it is impossible to contain. It is very smart, very fast-moving, very determined foe. But let's move along here really quick. We'll get to the big news, which shouldn't really be big news. I guess the WHO moving up their pandemic checklist. Remember, it goes from low to medium to high to very high to very, very high to super duper high to ludicrous high. And then I guess they finally made it to pandemic. So on that checklist, they said, yeah, here we are, pandemic, which, I guess, as much rejoicing about that. How anticlimactic is this, right? And to really put a point in this, we get Dr. Tedros coming out here saying, I remind all countries that we are calling on you to, 1, activate and scale up your emergency response mechanisms, communicate with your people about the risks and how they can protect themselves, find, isolate, test, and treat every COVID-19 case and trace every contact. How disappointing. I mean, yes, you should do that stuff. That's literally the advice I gave on January 24th, 47 extremely critical days ago. This should have been the communication from the WHO more than a month ago. Absolutely ridiculous. Heads need to roll over this one. It's that this amount of time in an exponentially growing situation, every single day counts, every single minute counts. This was a complete waste of time. Not good. And because of that, we get tables that look like this. So the Italy numbers haven't updated yet. What are we at? It's about 150 here in the afternoon on March 11th. But I can see that their death count, a lot of these are unchanged from yesterday. So this will update soon. Iran reporting a lot more cases here. Again, I think they've got many, many more cases than they are reporting at this point in time because of the number of people that left Iran and managed to be infected with it when they arrived back in places like Texas and Europe and Bahrain and other places. All right. South Korea, they got themselves down to only 35 new cases yesterday, back up to 242 today. Not an encouraging uptick. Didn't want to see that here today. Was really hoping that South Korea's gold standard had that under control, but still a lot less than the 800 they were posting a while ago. So maybe that's just a temporary upblip. Certainly hope so. Spain. Wow, in the thick of it now and marching right up the ladder right here. France, not yet reporting for today. Germany with plus 91. The United States makes it to the 1,000 club with 22 additional things here. But massive amounts of testing still needs to be done in the United States. I'm absolutely positive that this is going to report in a lot higher as we go forward. And as well, I wonder how we're tracking the deaths here because I think we'd have to start monitoring hospital systems for an uptick in pneumonia, particularly what they would call idiopathic pneumonia, meaning they don't know what it comes from. No change in Diamond Princess here. Switzerland moving right up. Japan not reporting in yet here in this. The Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, UK. That's one of their largest increases right there. Denmark really piling in now. Belgium, but Qatar. Look at this. Plus 238 cases, bringing them to 262. That's a big explosion right there. I don't know if that represents an increase in testing or what, but that's a pretty bad sign right there. Not least of which is because Qatar, not known for its northern climate, shall we say. We're really hoping here that the warmer climates were going to give us a break on this thing and a respite. And maybe it will, because when we look at the equatorial/summer places like Thailand, like Vietnam, very low numbers of case counts. I can't fit them all on one page anymore, so we're going to jump down the list a little further just to point out a couple of other cases here. Singapore, again, gold standard of containment, plus 12 cases. If you charted this, they would be growing just like this, very linearly, very, very containable, very manageable. But Bahrain also reporting a big jump here with Qatar. So not encouraged to see the Middle East really starting to heat up on this whole thing. Malaysia, also a warm country. It's starting to report more cases in here. And Canada, just about to make it to the 100 club right here. And look at this number right here. Canada's doing just about the poor job the United States is doing with testing. And we'll get into that in just a second. But first, something I wanted to do here was to just look at this chart, which I found very illuminating. So let's just take a quick peek at it here. So that'll start over again. I'm going to play it a couple times here. All right. So what we're doing here is we're looking at day relative to when you had 100 cases. So that would be way back here. Sorry, that's right here at the 0 mark. So when do you get to 100 cases? That's right at this line right here. So you can see when Italy gets to 100 cases, boom, off it goes. This is an exponential chart right here. So this is approaching 10,000 cases, right? So we're going from 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. And so the point being made here is that if we align all of these cases for when they cross the 100 mark, what you're going to find is that the United States is, and as well as France and Germany, is just about 10 days behind Italy at this point in time. Very much on the same track, very much headed in the same direction here, very much going in the same trajectory. And so, listen, if we didn't heed China's warnings, and China gave us plenty of warnings. I know China was fairly incomplete with their data and people weren't trusting the government, but I certainly trust the actions more than the words of every organization or individual or country. And what did we see from China? We saw them on January 24th start construction on a mega hospital in Wuhan. That was all the data I needed to know that something was up. But a lot of people didn't heed that, weren't able to interpret it. But how about the information coming from Italy now? Jason Van Schuer writes here, from a well-respected friend, an intensivist and A&E consultant who is currently in northern Italy, I feel the pressure to give you a quick personal update about what's happening in Italy and also give some quick direct advice about what you should do. First, Lombardy is the most developed region in Italy. It's got an extraordinarily good healthcare. I have worked in Italy, UK, and Australia, and don't make the mistake to think that what's happening is happening in a third world country. So just because Italy's not failing at something here, and they're certainly not failing at their healthcare. They're very good at what they do. The current situation is difficult to imagine, and numbers do not explain things at all. Our hospitals are overwhelmed by COVID-19. They are running at 200% capacity. So when you overwhelm your hospitals, even ordinary things become life-threatening. Ambulances go out an hour late rather than in 8 minutes, and next thing you know, very treatable and survivable heart attacks no longer are. So things like that. As well, listen to this. We've stopped all routine, all ORs, operating rooms have been converted to these intensive treatment units, and they are now diverting or not treating all other emergencies like trauma or strokes. Think about that. They're now diverting or not treating all other emergencies because their operating rooms, their intensive treatment units have all been filled up. There are hundreds of patients with severe respiratory failure, and many of them do not have access to anything above a reservoir mask. This is what failure looks like when you exceed your hospital system's ability to cope. Patients above 65 or younger with comorbidities are not even assessed by the intensive trauma unit, I guess, right? If I'm reading that right, or intensive treatment unit. I'm not saying not tubed. I'm saying not assessed. And no ITU staff attends when they arrest, meaning they go into failure. Staff are working as much as they can, but they are starting to get sick and are emotionally overwhelmed. My friends call me in tears because they see people dying in front of them and they can only offer some oxygen. Ortho and pathologists are being given a leaflet and sent to see patients. Please stop, read this again, and think. Right? So orthopedists, pathologists like me, that would give me a leaflet and send me in to try and do what I can for a patient. Not what you want to have happening. Trust me on that one. We've seen the same pattern in different areas a week apart. There's no reason that in a few weeks it won't be the same everywhere. This is the pattern. A few positive cases, first mild measures, people are told to avoid ED, but still hang out in groups. Everybody says not to panic. Some moderate respiratory failures and a few severe ones that need tube, but regular access to ED is significantly reduced, so everything looks great. Tons of patients with moderate respiratory failure that over time deteriorate to saturate ICUs first, then NIVs, then CPAP hoods, and then even O2. Running out of O2. Oh my gosh. Staff gets so sick, it gets difficult to cover shifts. Mortality spikes also from all other causes that can't be treated properly. That is a great description. That's what an overwhelmed hospital system looks like. Everything about how to treat them is online, but the only things that will make a difference are, do not be afraid of massively strict measures to keep people safe. Yeah, it's going to be the non-pharmaceutical interventions that he's talking about. That's the only thing that can make a difference in this story. If governments won't do this, at least keep your family safe. Your loved ones with history of cancer or diabetes or any transplant will not be tubed if they need it, even if they are young. By safe, I mean you do not attend them, and you decide who does, and you teach them how to. So keep them safe, keep them out of harm's way. Don't be attending gatherings. Don't get the disease. Don't bring it home. That's the best advice we have right here. So the worrying part is that now we're starting to get stories that are coming out about how younger patients are also being hit hard. And it wasn't at all comforting in any way to say, oh, well, it really strikes the elderly, I guess, unless you were in your 30s. And somehow there was comfort in that. But it's not good that we're losing people of any age. And now, however, this is striking younger and younger. This comes from this. And forgot to tell you, by the way, all these, I got some complaints, and they're very valid, where people were scribbling down, getting writer's cramp, trying to write down these links. I'm going to put them all in the notes at the bottom of this, and you should be able to just click on them if you want. All right? You're welcome. Reading this, Dr. Nantino said, a week ago, we opened a 6-bed ICU for COVID-19 critically ill patients. In 2 days, our unit filled up, and we extended it to 10 beds on March 3, which filled up during the same afternoon. Now we're planning to merge into the cardio and general ICUs to use the general ICU beds for 10 more COVID patients. So that's the same thing we heard about in the previous example, which is just expanding into any area of the hospital, whether it's an operating room or an intensive treatment unit or whatever, just to get some more beds. In an alarming development, Dr. Nantino said younger patients were being affected, saying the ages of patients range from 46 to 83. With only a small number having important underlying conditions. That's a bombshell if that turns out to be true. So we're going to keep hunting this down and see what's going on. But that's a very, very frightening clinical development if it's true. A, for the younger, because it means there's a lot more people that can be impacted with this, but mostly as well, if they do not have important underlying conditions, that is a turn for the worse in this story. He added, the last days are showing a younger population involved. And here's the explanation possibly, as if the elderly and weaker part of the population crashed early, and now younger patients, having exhausted their physiological reserves, come to overcrowded, overwhelmed hospitals with little resources left, little internal health resources. So that's really important to note, that development right there. I'm not happy to hear that one at all. The National Health Service in the UK adding, we need to be careful to have some ICU capacity for younger patients. This is where important, difficult decisions need to be made. What an impossible situation that would be if you have to choose out of multiple patients who gets life-saving treatment, who doesn't. That's just a very, very bad situation to be in. This is Younger Patients U.S. edition with an Italian connection. So California doctor says 3 men he knows struck down with coronavirus are all in intensive care and are as young as 40, contradicting claims that the disease only impacts the elderly. Dr. Sam Fink, who was based in the affluent town of Taranza, began treating 2 of the men following their return home from a ski trip to northern Italy late last month. So it's March 11th today, so that would have been in late February. I've never seen anything like this, he says. So an Italian connection. Again, this is supporting my hypothesis, or theorizing, I should say, that Italy has some other version of this thing that's much worse than the versions that seem to be going around elsewhere. I would suspect that Iran has the same version of this, some sort of strain that's not behaving like other strains, and it's very, very troubling to see this sort of data coming up now. In particular, this explanation here of that maybe the trajectory we saw, which, by the way, there's some data in the SARS data that supported this, that yes, you see the elderly crashing earlier because they have weaker immune systems. Younger people are holding on for a little bit longer. But then finally their bodies give out and then they show up and present as serious. So if that's the trajectory, we're going to have to follow that very closely because that has huge implications for hospitals, hospital staffing, and overall capacity, things like that. Remember, the gold standard for the pandemic approach is clear, consistent, transparent, and frequent communication. I suppose I should add timely to that. Dr. Tedros, you were 47 days late to declaring this a pandemic and getting everybody activated around that. And you need to do all of these steps right here. And if you do these steps, particularly down here in the 3 row, right? So this is rigorous contact tracing. You pay for the test, you pay for the treatment, you pay for the quarantine so people don't evade you. And then you quarantine all exposed contacts, all right? As well, I should put in there that as part of quarantining is extreme social distancing and isolation and things like that. Why? Because our rallying cry needs to be flatten the curve. Remember, without protective measures, you get this big blob of people showing up all at once. It exceeds your healthcare system capacity. And this is where unnecessary deaths begin to mushroom and spiral out of control for you, as we're seeing in Italy right now. If you can flatten the curve, and I called it shift the curve to the right, but somebody on Twitter today, and I forget who, said that it should be called flatten the curve. I like that better because we like to be positive. Flatten the curve it's got good positive action. Shift the curve, that was a little wobbly and passive. So whoever suggested flatten the curve, I like it better. I've started hashtagging it that way. Flatten the curve. That's what we need to do now because we're out of other options. The time to do all of this earlier stuff that could have made a difference is gone. And now we're just down to making sure that we can do what we can to flatten the curve. Now, you, as a private citizen, have a lot to do with this. This is up to each of us now. This is not up to health authorities to tell us how to flatten the curve. They can do their part, but in the absence of them doing their part, or in addition to them doing their part, we have our part. And so I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So here's a movement I can endorse. Stay the fuck home. Yes. I like it. This is a movement I can strictly endorse because this is something that you can do and every one of us should be doing. We've heard the tepid advice that maybe elderly should stay home, particularly people with comorbidities. No. The way you flatten the curve, and this is for everybody's benefit, is you stay home. And as much as possible, you have to engage in strong social isolation plus great hygiene. All right? Don't panic. But be alert. Now, we have a bunch of cases now in my region. I was just working with our town officials last night to educate everybody and craft our local plans. And I'm just really blessed to be in a small town where the leadership is strong. They're on board. They're very smart and caring. So, I'm really pleased with that. And I would invite everybody here to go and make sure you engage as much as you can in your local communities and town, cities, whatever, to make sure that you can bring the right information along. Wash your hands often. Practice good cough and sneeze etiquette. Wear a mask. If you've got to cough and sneeze a lot, don't be out in public, right? Just don't do that. Practice social distancing. No hugs, kisses, no handshakes, no high fives. If you got to, use safer alternatives. Tap your feet, bump your elbows, whatever you got to do, right? No concerts, no stage plays, no sporting events, no other mass entertainment events. This is just like the Spanish flu. You just social distancing. Number one thing. It's great. So that means refraining from public places like museums, exhibitions, movie theaters, nightclubs, stuff like that. Stay away from social gatherings, club meetings, religious services, private parties, all that stuff. Reduce travel to a minimum. Don't travel long distances if not absolutely necessary. No public transportation if not absolutely necessary. Work from home. If you can't, very sorry, just figure out how to be as safe as possible if you can't work from home. Urge your employers to allow it if it's possible. Replace as many social interactions with remote alternatives like phone calls, video chats, things like that. And do not leave your home if not absolutely necessary. Like the movement, got to support that. Does it work? If we did that, would it work? Yeah, heck yeah, it'll work. Hong Kong's coronavirus response says as much. It leads to a really sharp drop in flu cases. So look here, zeroed it, literally zeroed it out. And it's a month earlier than normal because normally this thing would zero out about here. Look at this, January, February. Just barely made it to the second month. Their flu season very ordinarily is making it out here to months 3 or 4. So a month earlier than usual and completely zeroed it out. Astonishing. What'd they do? Well, Hong Kong's extreme measures to combat the spread of the coronavirus, that included school closures, working from home, all of that brought an early end to the winter flu season, suggesting they might also be effective against the new disease, experts say. Well, yeah, that's absolutely the case. Go experts. State the obvious, but be stronger next time. Data provided by the Government Center for Health Protection show the incidence of infection with influenza had fallen to less than 1% by the end of February. Wow, marking an end to the winter flu season, which normally runs through March or into April. Okay, so, but Hong Kongers, and this is why we had to start this stuff early, this is why having the WHO come out to this 47 days late was a really terrible thing, because it takes time to reorient a culture around the kinds of cultural hygiene practices we have to put in place where people are shamed if they go out into public sick, where there's a critical mass of mask wearers where if you're not wearing a mask in public, all of a sudden you feel the pressure of that. It takes time to get there. Washing hands, not touching our faces, staying 6 feet apart from each other or 2 meters, all that stuff just takes time. But Hong Kongers are particularly compliant with public health measures because in the SARS outbreak, which claimed almost 300 lives in the territory, well, that's still fresh on their minds. They remembered that and they learned their lessons, and it's still operative. Hong Kong has instituted a partial lockdown. Schools and universities have been closed since the middle of January. They got right on that really early. Employees have been encouraged to work from home. Public sports facilities and museums have been shut. Residents told to avoid large gatherings. So that's how you do it. Hong Kong is following a gold standard pandemic approach here. Absolutely. And critically, the territory also closed most of its border crossings with mainland China and ordered arrivals from the mainland to self-quarantine 14 days. So they got it way up here, okay? Way back up here. And anyway, they're hitting all of these things you need to do. Doing it poorly, the Canadian edition, heard from a few Canadians they felt left out, and I don't want you to feel left out. So Canada, not doing a great job either. This is just one anecdote coming from Quebec, where the Premier is recommending the public avoid countries to be at risk. You should not be recommending the public avoid countries. What you should be doing is banning travel from those countries. Israel's done that. A lot of countries have done that, right? It just makes a lot of sense. We have to be prudent, he told reporters. Well, but prudent would mean actually banning travel from affected countries, obviously, because you don't. Why? Because you don't want any inbound infections. You don't have to fight those plus whatever you got going on locally, right? Individuals with flu-like symptoms should not be in contact with the elderly, and the public should avoid shaking hands with others to avoid the spread of the virus. He added, this is old news right here. This is like so last week ago. It's not just individuals with flu-like symptoms. Like if you know you have endemic spread, you don't want anybody to be in contact with your elderly. In fact, the elderly ought to be self-isolating as much as possible, especially those who do have the comorbidities. But to stop the spread of the virus, it's not just the elderly who need to be protected. Everybody should be practicing social distancing and not handshaking and all that stuff. The Health Ministry's update, which was provided late Tuesday night, comes after the public health authorities announced earlier in the day that a Quebecer who had contracted the disease caused by the novel coronavirus used public transit in Montreal. All right, so that's the big deal right there. And how's Canada doing sort of nationally? Well, they've run 624 tests as of today. Pulled this off of this website right here. So totally insufficient, failing on all sorts of things. Failed on this one right here, failed on this one right here, failed on this one right here. Lots of failures there. So guess what, Canada? You get to enjoy part 2 of this along with everybody else who fails at that. So let's contrast that with doing it right. Look at Hungary. Only 13 cases, right? And what did Hungary do? Well, they declared a state of emergency right away. They closed all universities. They banned all indoor events for more than 100 people, outdoor events of more than 500 people. They stopped flights, trains, buses from Slovenia and Austria, tightened control of the border with Croatia, and requires quarantine for Hungarian citizens returning from Italy, China, South Korea, and Iran. You might want to put Canada and the U.S. on there soon, Hungary. But that's doing it right. I mean, look, here they are very early in the process, and they did all of this. Now, I don't know if they're also aggressively testing what their contact tracing might be or what their quarantine procedures would be for people who are asymptomatic who had contact. But that's an encouraging first sign right there from Hungary. That's good. How about doing it very wrong? This is the No Reagents Edition. This is in the United States. This is about the shortage of crucial chemicals creates a new obstacle for testing. Geez, I thought we just got rid of, we barely got rid of the old obstacle. March 10th, Helen Branswell. Great stuff here. So the push to increase testing in the U.S. for the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19 has hit a new stumbling block. Shortages of key chemicals needed to start up and run the tests. So there's this key product. So there's several key products, but there's one made by Qiagen, dwindling supply of that right now. And so you absolutely need it to isolate the RNA so that it can be tested. No chemical, no isolated RNA, no test. All right. Robert Redfield, who's doing a spectacularly bad job in his role as director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, told Politico, which first reported the story, that he is worried about the supplies labs of the chemicals known as reagents. He's worried about it. Geez, he should have been worried about this 47 days ago. I got to be completely honest about that. The availability of those reagents is obviously being looked at. Thank you. I'm confident of the actual tests that we have, but as people begin to operationalize the test, they realize there's other things they need to do the test. Yeah, like the test kit materials. That's genius level statement right there. Still, that and other shortages related to the kits represent another hurdle in the effort to roll out diagnostics to detect whether patients are infected with the new coronavirus. A key step in preventing or slowing its spread. Yes, that's very, very important. Testing. It's very important. How important is it? It is way up here important. It's like step 2, aggressive testing. Really, really important. So the United States right now has only conducted 5,000 tests to date. That's just absolutely astonishing in a country of this size, facing the number of outbreaks that it's currently facing. This is failing supply logistics 101. Like, this is the entry-level course for doing your job, CDC, is making sure that you have sufficient things that you would need to do your job. That's just part of the job. I have nothing else to say. I'm done with that. All right. Remember now, it's because we know that a lot of these things aren't happening at the national levels in a lot of countries. And so I'm looking at you, Europe, and I'm looking at parts of Asia, not all of it, but some parts. And I'm looking at my own country, and probably going to be looking south of the equator once this all shifts down there and picks up during their fall and winter. At any rate, because these things aren't happening, that means that we have a call to action here that we have to think about. So this was a letter from Italy. It came off of Twitter, and here's the link for that again. I'll have the links all posted here. Please share. I am writing to you from Bergamo, Italy, at the heart of the coronavirus crisis. The news media in the U.S. has not captured the severity of what's happening here. I'm writing this post because each of you today, not the government, not the school district, not the mayor, each individual citizen has the chance today to take actions that will deter the situation in Italy, but this will be other countries too, from becoming your own country's reality. The only way to stop this virus is to limit contagion. Yep, you got to stop the spread. We have to flatten the curve. We have to do this. We've got to limit the contagion to give our health care system a chance to stay on top of this. And the only way to limit contagion is for millions of people to change their behavior today. That's it, right? That's it. Millions of people have to change their behavior today. Not easy, but we can do it. And it begins with you. It begins with me. It begins with us. If you are in the Europe or the U.S., you are weeks away from where we are today in Italy. I can hear you now. It's just a flu. It only affects old people with preconditions. There are 2 reasons why coronavirus brought Italy to its knees. First, it is a flu, and is devastating when people get really sick. They need weeks of ICU. And second, weeks of ICU. Weeks. 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks in the ICU. So not only do they occupy the beds, but for a long time. And that's just, it's horrible. And second, because of how fast and effectively it spreads. There is a 2-week incubation period, and many who have it never show symptoms. That's a problem. When Prime Minister Conte announced last night the entire country, 60 million people, would go on lockdown, the line that struck me most was, there is no more time. Because to be clear, this national lockdown is a Hail Mary. What he means is that if the numbers of contagion do not start to go down, the system, Italy, will collapse. Why? Today, the ICUs in Lombardy are at capacity, more than capacity. They have begun to put ICU units in the hallways. If the numbers do not go down, the growth rate of contagion tells us there will be thousands of people in a matter of a week, 2 weeks, who will need care. What will happen when there are 100 or 1,000 people who need the hospital and only a few ICU places left? So let me back this up. The only way to stop this virus is to limit contagion. Period. And the only way to limit contagion is for millions of people to change their behavior today. This is our challenge. We have to flatten the curve. It means that we need to take it upon ourselves and not wait for official authorities to get out there and tell people the things they need to do to either not contract the disease or to not spread it, or to really slow down the spread of this whole thing. Because as soon as you get to the boom stage, there's nothing left you can do. So case, cluster, boom. We have to take it upon ourselves to try and halt it, even before we get to the cluster stage. If we're already there, halt it at the boom stage. Even if we're in the boom stage, do everything we can to not be individually contributing to more of that happening. And the balancing act right now, some of this is going to fall on us at this point in time because the authorities have already dropped the ball. They're way too late to the game. By the time they catch up bureaucratically, politically, it'll take weeks and months still. So there's lots that's going to be done. This is going to call us to greatness, people. This is really our challenge to either rise to this or not. And I'm really hoping, and I'm trust that many of us, it's going to bring out the best in a lot of people. But this is it. It's the real deal. It's deadly serious at this point in time, and we need to flatten the curve. And the only way we can do that is by we need to get that R0 as low as we possibly can. So a lot of these non-pharmaceutical interventions right here, this falls on us right now. Don't wait for the official quarantine. Start your own self-isolation as much as you can. Markets, of course, are falling very, very sharply, continue to fall sharply. I don't think they're anywhere near their bottoms at this point in time because we've never seen anything like this. It's going to destroy supply chains and change consumer behaviors in ways that are unpredictable at this point in time, but it's just not going to be what it was a year ago, for sure. Look at all this destruction right here. So Gilead, this little green box right here, of course, they have that remdesivir trial drug that might be helpful. So they're up a little bit. But I'm, seeing healthcare companies fall. Utilities are falling hard because, of course, they are interest rate sensitive stocks. But I would have thought they would have gone up. So because they're actually offering a rate of interest. We're seeing everything from Google to Facebook to Microsoft falling. Everything. I can't find a single sector that isn't being whacked hard here. And this one jumped out at me. The life insurance sector. Really, these are just super punishing declines we're seeing day after day after day, even during the rally day, which was a few days ago, which is that little ledge, the flat spot right there. They didn't participate. And of course, my explanation for this is that somebody's anticipating that there's going to be a lot of life insurance claims being paid out and hitting these companies' bottom lines pretty hard. And that was sort of individual companies on that heat map we just saw before. But, as of the time of this recording, now it's 220 right now. These were the sort of numbers we were seeing. Big declines in the indexes themselves. Oil still unable to catch a bid. Surprisingly, even gold going down. So what's next faced with this? I'll tell you what's next. Print. We're just going to see central banks starting to print. So go ahead and sell gold if you feel like you need to. This is paper gold's price, not solid gold. But I just can't think of anything that you really would need to do more than to hold hard assets as we go into this next stage, because the printing is going to be extraordinary. I don't know what else the central banks and the fiscal authorities and the governments can do besides print some more. So hard assets, of course, includes land. It includes all sorts of good real estate, water, timber, things like that. I'm a big fan of hard assets and tangible assets when the only response is to print some more. We just did a really spectacularly good webinar with Steen Jacobson, who's head of investment trading over at Saxo Bank, and John Husband, who runs a very large fund as well, to talk about this whole set of dynamics. So you might want to check that out. It was great. Came out really good. Remember, if the facts alarm you, the problem isn't with the facts. I told everybody this was going to get alarming. So we all have to go through our adjustment process. If we're being alarmed by any of this, it means we're not through our own personal adjustment process right now. I'm sure I have more adjustment process to go through. Right now, this is a scary sort of a looking challenge, and it's an enormous challenge, and eventually it's going to be one that has real personal consequences for all of us, and perhaps, I'm sure for myself as well. All right, our endorsed personal actions to go along with our endorsed national actions of yesterday. Prepare your household. We've said this very consistently from the beginning. Buy food, high caloric food, peanut butter, calories, carbohydrates, whatever you can that would store really well. Go ahead and get that because, we're not advising panic buying, but everybody should have a deep pantry. Just makes sense. Masks if you can. If you can't, come by Peak Prosperity. We're talking about ways that we might be able to MacGyver our way through this by making masks out of other things. Trim unnecessary expenses pronto, especially if you're a paycheck earner and you don't have a lot in reserve. Anything unnecessary right away. If you have Netflix subscriptions you don't really need, or anything that just feels totally unnecessary, or, just get rid of it, because our advice is that there's going to be a gap between when people's finances get really hit hard, when small businesses and medium-sized businesses get hit hard, and before the political deadlock and chasm that exists in the United States, before that can resolve itself. It's going to just take time. And in that time, that's when things are going to get a little bit tight. We think printing and money for Main Street is coming, but we think there might be a 2 to 3 month gap between when it's actually needed and when all the bickering and infighting allows it to actually flow. You need to be ready for that gap. Stay home. Just stay home and never go out sick. Just don't do it. Don't be that guy or gal. If you have to go out, really shopping, doctors, etc., wear a mask. If you've got one. If you haven't got one, figure out how to make one. Just don't go out sick. Just don't. Practice excellent personal hygiene, right? Don't touch your face, wash your hands, stand 6 feet. That's 2 meters from others at all times. Polite little wave greetings. Make your home a green zone if you can. Please do this so that at least you'll have the comfort of being inside your home without the anxiety of wondering if that last person who was there coughing inside had the dreaded COVID. Nobody inside your house, if you aren't 100% sure that they haven't been in contact or possibly infected somewhere along the way. Help others in your neighborhood and community, and absolutely do this. Absolutely. Take vitamins C and D3 to boost your health. Get good rest, get good sleep. So those are our endorsed personal actions. Our endorsed national actions include the ones we put up yesterday, which we amended slightly here. So make testing free for everyone. Yep. Pay quarantine people a reasonable stipend so they aren't incentivized to jump quarantine and go continue to earn a living. Pay for all hospital costs of SARS-2 victims. Do that right away. Announce that. Be public and bold about that. Suspend mortgage payments for everyone in a quarantine area and or provide rent vouchers. Provide food baskets to the elderly and arrange medicine deliveries. Immediately relax those stupid pharma laws that prevent people from securing as many months of necessary medication as they need. And maybe consider suspending federal tax payments for all households in small and medium businesses. The big ones, of course, can fend for themselves. Here's our tips on how to avoid being infected. So go ahead and read this at your own leisure again. I just amended this one slightly to say listen to trusted sources, whoever you consider those to be. But too many public officials are giving out inexcusably bad information. And we're still seeing that today, and showed that in a couple of examples, including the Canadian edition today. Remember, not the flu, not SARS. This is becoming less and less necessary to put this up, because I think people are getting that now. So my conclusions for today. This virus, it's moving 10 times faster than bureaucratic and political institutions in the West, except maybe Hungary. Awesome. Way to go, Hungary. Italian data says many other countries have perhaps 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks to prepare themselves in their hospital systems. And then boom, we get the boom phase, and all of our planning had better, whatever planning we had in place, that's what we're going to have to live with. All right, because national level political and health bureaucratic structures are moving too slowly, we need everyone to step up, do the right things, stay home, help each other out, be kind and generous, get yourself prepared, practice good hygiene, These are the things that are going to help us flatten the curve. But because of what wasn't done up to this point in time, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And my final conclusion is, it didn't have to be this way. It just didn't. We could have done better. And here we are. So now it's on each of us at the private citizen level to do what needs to be done and assume the mantle of responsibility for how things turn out. All right. That's all I've got for today. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.
Hi folks, Adam Taggart here. Chris Martinson and I are the co-founders of Peak Prosperity. If you want to get alerted whenever we release a new video from Chris, just click the red subscribe button right beneath the YouTube video player. Once you've done that, a little bell icon will appear right next to it. Click on that bell. It looks like this. And that's it. The next time we publish a video from Chris, you'll immediately receive a notification from YouTube. Thanks for watching our videos.